Then Sukarno appears to collapse at a public reception, raising the stakes even further.
There were rumors that his kidney was failing, and of course put the army on high alert.
It did raise questions. If he's sick, what will happen if he dies? Who will move? Who will take over? The PKI do it by themselves? Will the army do it? Will God knows who else do it?
Rumors circulate that an army council of generals, backed by the CIA, is plotting to overthrow Sukarno.
Army was clearly keen if Sukarno became incapacitated, they would seize power.
The morning of October 1st, when Time magazine called me and said, Don, there's been a tremendous coup. We don't know what's going on, but we know that 6 of the top Indonesian generals have been killed in this slaughter overnight. And we don't know whether Sukarno is behind it, what's going on, but you're the only person, the only journalist in Hong Kong that has a visa.
3 days after the murders, the bodies of the dead generals are discovered in a well. President Sukarno has appointed General Suharto to restore security. Suharto personally witnesses the exhumation. Suharto also closes down the civilian press. The army-controlled newspapers run false but graphic stories telling how communist women had tortured and mutilated the generals, gouging out their eyes, cutting off their sexual organs, and dancing over their bodies. The Indonesian Communist Party, the PKI, is blamed for the abortive coup.
The first big event I covered in Jakarta was the funeral of the 6 generals. We had heard tales about the way this slaughter had been done, the mutilation of the generals, how they had been tortured and killed. And we had no way of knowing it. We didn't speak to any eyewitnesses. And so if the army put out with authority that these bodies were mutilated, it became the perception.
If the Communist Party was responsible, Western diplomats could not understand why it would mount such an ineffective operation.
I would have said it made no sense at that time because the communists were moving very effectively. They were achieving their objectives by other means. And I would have said, why in the heck should they mount a coup?
It was known that the murders were carried out by junior army officers calling themselves the 30th of September movement. But the question of who, if anyone, was pulling the strings behind these officers was much less certain. Nevertheless, the diplomatic cables do reveal the West was keen for Suharto and the army to drive home its advantage in this brutal Cold War struggle. Seven weeks after the murder of the generals, Communist Party Chairman Aidit is finally captured in central Java. He's forced to sign a confession and is then executed on General Suharto's personal orders. The once invincible President Sukarno is now powerless to prevent the wholesale slaughter unfolding in his country. General Suharto and the army now plan his downfall and the complete takeover of government. The military arms civilian death squads and supervises further mass killings. This man was part of a Muslim militia gang in East Java in 1965.
Sometimes, all the students were collected in a certain place and then instructed a certain leader from the army, and they distribute to us a number of people, and ask us to kill them. So we know exactly that this is organized.
The courts ruled that the Indonesian Communist Party was the sole puppet master behind the murders. Over 70 death sentences were handed down for the crime of having prior knowledge of the plan. But it's far from clear who else had prior knowledge of the plan to kidnap the generals. True responsibility is variously attributed to President Sukarno, General Suharto, and Western intelligence agencies. The only leader of the 30th of September movement left alive is Colonel Latif, who survived 33 years in prison. He claims he informed General Suharto of their plans, and Suharto has admitted meeting with him.
Sama itu sudah tentu sama Sidarto memberitahu kalau paginya akan jatuhkan pada tindak sama Bung Karno. Karena semua sepakat atau dianggap loyal sama Bung Karno.
Those who see the hand of Suharto say it was his agents who infiltrated the 30th of September movement to make sure the generals were killed that fateful night. The rebel soldiers maintained it was never their intention to kill the generals. Their intention, they said, was to bring them before President Sukarno to face charges of planning a coup against him.
Who plotted the 1965 coup? Written by Dr. Greg Polgrain. Suharto always said it was the communists. Yet from the start, says Colonel Latif, Suharto himself was involved. Indonesian President B.J. Habibie has refused to release Colonel Latif, whose arrest in 1965 for involvement in a military coup was followed by Major General Suharto's rise to the presidency. Habibie has granted amnesty to 73 other political prisoners, even to members of the Indonesian Communist Party, PKI, accused of involvement in the 1965 coup attempt. Refusing amnesty to Latif now shows how Suharto overshadows Habibie. Interviewed in Sepenang prison, Jakarta, 3 days after Suharto resigned, Latif told me that he expected never to be released. Despite various kidney operations and the stroke he suffered last year, Latif is still very alert. His explanation for his involvement in 1965 directly implicates Suharto. By late 1965, President Sukarno was ailing and without a successor. Tension between the PKI and the armed forces was growing. Conspiracies rumors were rife. Who would make the first move? On the night of the 30th of September 1965, 6 hours before the military coup, Latif confirmed with Suharto that the plan to kidnap 7 army generals would soon start. Latif was an officer attached to the Jakarta Military Command. As head of the Army Strategic Reserve Command, Kostrad, Suharto held the optimum position to crush the operation, so his name should have been at the top of the list. When troops who conducted the kidnappings asked why Suharto was not on the list, they were told, because he is one of us. There was a rumor the 7 generals were intending to seize power from Sukarno. Latif and 2 other army officers in the operation, Lieutenant Colonel Untung, in charge of some of the troops guarding Sukarno's palace, and General Suparjo, a commander from Kalimantan, planned to kidnap the generals and bring them before President Sukarno to explain themselves. The 30th of September movement was thus a limited preemptive strike by pro-Sukarno officers against anti-Sukarno officers. They kidnapped the generals and occupied strategic centers in Jakarta's main square, without touching Suharto's headquarters. The plan involved no killing, but it went terribly wrong and 6 of the 7 died. Although Untung was assigned responsibility for collecting the generals, this crucial task was then taken over by a certain Camaruzzaman alias Sham, evidently a double agent, with contacts in the Jakarta Military Command as well as the PKI. At his trial, Sham admitted responsibility for killing the generals, but blamed the PKI under it. In 1965, when Suharto accused the PKI of responsibility for killing the generals, the Sham Adat link gave Suharto enough leverage to convince his contemporaries. Between Sham and Suharto, there was a 20-year friendship going back to the fight against the Dutch in Central Java in 1948-1949. This strengthened in the late 1950s, when both attended the Bandung Staff College. Suharto was also on close terms with Untung, who served under him during the campaign to reclaim Netherlands New Guinea in 1962, and who became a family friend. During his trial in 1978, not only did Latif explain that he met Suharto on the night of the coup, but also that several days before he met both Suharto and his wife in the privacy of Suharto's home to discuss the overall plan. The court declared that this information was not relevant. Suharto, more than anybody, described the events that night as communist-inspired. Suharto's claim that he saw the slain generals' bodies had been sexually mutilated was shown to be deliberately false by post-mortem documents, not revealed till decades later. This false claim provoked months of killings against communists, particularly in Bali and Central and East Java. The PKI, numbering 20 million, were mostly rice farmers. Accused en masse, they became victims in one of the worst massacres this century. In the opinion of the author, many writers underestimated the death toll, which may be around 1 million persons. Another 700,000 were imprisoned without trial. The most notorious general involved, Sarwo Edhie, claimed not 1 but 2 million were killed. And we did a good job, he added. Traumatized by violence, the nation became politically malleable. Using Suharto's own categorization of crimes related to 1965, his prior knowledge of the alleged coup places him in Category A involvement, the same as those who faced execution or life imprisonment. The release of Colonel Latif is a litmus test of Habibi's willingness to promote genuine reform. Fewer than 10 long-term prisoners remain. Latif has pleaded, most of them are already 70 years old and fragile. For the sake of humanity, please take notice of us.